Excellent.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Sleek. How
Bob.
are we?
I'm all right actually. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm all right. I've had another accolade.
Oh, have you?
I'm really sorry. I'm not sure whether you can call me Mr. Sleek
You're
anymore.
going to have to call him Double Sir.
No, the Denham and District Slimming World has very kindly bestowed on me the honour of being Man of the Year.
Man of the Year.
Which is quite a thing, really.
Yeah.
On the grounds that it was a choice. It was a narrow choice because it's mainly women, but it was voted for.
Right. Democratic. Well,
Yeah. There's a lad called Rohan who I thought should have got it, but unfortunately they decided otherwise.
You were the populist.
Well, yes, absolutely. You cheat. You're looking at my paper straight away.
Not at all.
Just
You
there.
may have realised,
Just
people
there.
on the video, you won't have realised, people on the audio, that we are in new surroundings.
We are.
We're at my dad's flat.
Yes.
It's something that I reside in at the moment.
Sunny Saltaire.
In sunny, Saltaire Shipley. It's
Surely you call it Saltaire.
we're BD17, so it's a Balen postcode.
Well, yeah, but I mean, adding 10 grand to the price, I mean...
Yeah, that's very Saltaire.
That's very Saltaire,
That's
yeah.
what you pay for a sandwich, right?
I'm looking out the window, actually. I can see wonderful Rose Brow, where I recently took a photo of Thomas looking down on Bradford.
Okay.
And it is quite... it's a lovely view. It's both greenery, the rivers, and also the industrial past. And I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People may have also realised, for the radio listeners, audio, we have a lovely tie-dye, pink and yellow BoB, Brothers of Battenburg. It's almost a flag, isn't it? Cover to keep us on our merry way.
Yes, I think it's definitely a merchandising possibility for the future.
He's got his business head.
Come on, Bob flags. what self-respecting bobber wouldn't want one?
$5.99.
Give over.
$14.99.
That's more like it. That's more like
What a
it.
tight leash.
So what else have you been up to this week then?
This week, well, I've been spending quite a bit of time with your good self and Lady G, up at Black Dyke Mills.
Yes.
We're creating something there, aren't we? Or, I don't know what you call it, facilitating it.
Yeah, we're creating a creative art space.
We are, yes, event space.
And coffee shop.
Yeah, coffee shop. I'm going to be doing some omelettes.
Which is mad. But brilliant at the same time.
It's
we've got an opportunity, and we at the moment we seem to be taking it.
Yes, so, it's almost come through this show. Really, we've agreed upon it.
Yeah, it has.
It has.
Everything comes from Bob and those that Bob.
He hasn't eaten yet.
Couldn't eat a full one.
They say you get man out of the year. Low blood sugar.
Absolutely.
So, today we have a couple more squares, don't we?
We do. We have 4 squares which make a slice. And obviously neither of us knows what the other is going to bring. Although you have just given yourself away by having...
You accuse me of this. I'm full of paranoid
people in my
life.
You'll make up your own minds, Bobbers, in a few minutes.
I've got no idea what you're bringing.
Okay.
Unless it's to do with populism, then you've already let the cat out of the bag.
I let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, I just said a word.
So what's your first square this week, Side Pie the Poach again?
My first square this week is... We keep on looking at your pants by accident. I'm not sure which to go for first. I'm gonna throw us in the deep end a little bit and maybe blush myself. I'm bringing sex.
Ooh.
As a square this week.
Is that why you brought the flag?
Yes, it's a rug. Put down.
Is that how you did the tie-dye?
Well, it's a net as well. There's a pit underneath usually.
Okay. So sex.
Sex, yes. I thought I'd bring it. I haven't brought any statistics on sex because that's not the point, is it not? I wasn't going to ask you.
Just to some, I guess.
Well, yes, this may come into it. But what I'm not going to ask you, Richard, as you know, we know what a lot of our listeners are very familiar to us. I'm not going to ask you personal details of your sex life or when you've had sex
You
last.
can ask, but I may not answer.
Exactly. No, but I'm not going to ask. But I am going to ask what I am going to ask in more general terms, I mean, is what sex means to you. Because I wrote a couple of things down.
Okay.
That I thought, so I'll go first, it is my square. And I wrote, bullet points about what sex means to me. And trust is up there.
Oh.
It's quite a big one. Orgasm, second, probably the most obvious. And I put babies as well, which comes at probably the very reptilian part of my brain. But babies, I guess, well, obviously are involved in sex or not in sex. You talked about numbers being important, status. For me, it's not important anymore, but perhaps earlier in my life, I did see sex or having a sex life as having some sort of status. It's all within our own games, isn't it? But there's something there, I think. Connection.
Yeah.
Warmth. And take this last one.
Oh, it's generally warm.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the two have got a couple of them words. Warmth and growth.
And growth.
And take that one,
where
you like it.
Let's hope for that. I'm 56, you know. The boy's asking me about sex.
Well, I thought I'd go back to awkwardness.
No, I think sex is an expression of the physical, but it's also an expression of the emotional. It's one of those few things that we do that crosses both of those. Perhaps most things do, I'm not sure. But certainly in terms of the physical, I mean, you mentioned orgasm, I mean, it's a natural need, if you like. There is also you mentioned the reptilian part of your brain, which essentially, from my understanding, controls your natural urges, if you like, which is the carnal stuff, the need to reproduce and procreate, and yet when people mention sex, they tend to think almost exclusively of the sort of physical act of copulation, if you like.
Yes.
Whereas sex is a lot more than that.
Absolutely. I think that's what I'm learning more and more, I feel, in terms of like, it is very much about the mental. Obviously it takes two to have sex, where you can argue you can have sex by yourself. With things like porn, which I brought earlier on.
There's a lot of sexually independent people out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's something with the porn, it's very much seeing that physical stuff. And there is no real nod, or a very loose nod, to the love and the mental relationship, the emotional relationship you have to have with somebody in order to have good sex, I guess.
So what for you would be good sex? For good sex for me would be essentially, it's more of it generally works better in a loving relationship rather than the mechanical, if you like.
Yeah.
Generally much more enjoyable and also much more satisfying. And when you kind of fuse with another, whatever your bent is, it creates that wondrous feeling of warmth and love, and also connection. Yeah, that's what it's about. It's about that connection, which probably starts the moment you see somebody.
I think so.
It's that first 4 seconds, isn't it?
Yeah.
Freud talked about where, the first time you see somebody, you essentially think, well, the first thing you think of is, are they a danger to me and are they going to kill me? Mm. And the second one is, do I find them attractive? Could they be a future partner? Could they be, do I want to go to bed with them, if you like?
Yeah.
And I think it's that basic, if you like, that animalistic.
Yes, it
and
is.
Sex is. I remember hearing somebody the other day saying sex is overrated, and I think that probably, as you rightly say, bringing in the comparative nature of sex, if you like, that is probably, that person is not necessarily either experienced or having good sex.
Absolutely,
because good sex is generally one of the better things in life and is probably quite difficult to overrate.
And it's yes, absolutely, and so you could say, I mean, this is a bit tenuous, but you could say sausages are overrated. It depends. If you can have very crap sausages, you can have very good sausages. Sex can be bad. It can be overrated if it is bad sex.
How's your sausages, Si?
Exactly. I like them grilled.
Yeah?
Well,
Do you like your bangers?
more than mash, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Plenty of gravy. But yeah, I think for me, the trust out, for me, you know, I asked what good sex is for me. Someone has to be trusting of you.
Yeah.
In order for it to be good, I think.
Those levels of acceptance.
Yeah. Acceptance, surrender, being comfortable enough with someone to know that they're not going to damage you, and not having it. In order to have good sex, you can't have your guard up, can you? You can't be self-conscious. You can't. You have to be in the moment. My dad, who does a tantra workshop, which isn't all about sex. A lot of it's not about sex at all, but does bring sexual energy and sexual, mental and physical aspects into what he does.
Yeah.
Said to me that during his research there was one scholar or practitioner that said that we crave sex so much, and most people at least deem it so important because it's one of those very few times in our lives when we're actually 100% present in that moment, and you never feel more alive. It's hard to feel more alive.
I would
than
agree
when
with
you're
that.
having
I would
sex.
agree with that perspective. What I would say though, that is true about perhaps all sex, but good sex, it requires two, or as you've explored in a previous show, two or more people to actually be feeling the same type of elation, if you like, that same kind of being with the program, if you like.
Well, yeah, non-consensual sex is probably the worst kind.
I mean, there are some people that in my past and in, I'm sure your past, where you've perhaps felt attracted to somebody, but the sex hasn't been as good as perhaps it promised to be. And some people perhaps work on sex, and some people are just very giving in sex, if you like. And it is that giving of yourself without being selfish that probably defines good sex. Yes,
and they say, and that overlaps. That's who you are as a person. Usually, if you're a giver in the bedroom, you're usually a feeder or a nurturer, or somebody who likes to give in every other kind of way. So they do overlap.
Doing things from another's perspective. It's not easy for us blokes.
No, we are called on a regular basis. Well, I say
we're pretty
selfish, blardy blahs.
Yeah.
And I get that. And there's the other argument. Well, who am I doing it for if not for myself? Because it's my life. I'm gonna live it. And it's. I think that's maybe one of the beautiful things about the female-male energy is that women are on the whole thinking of others all the time. Maybe too much because, you know, they
generally,
they'll end up doing nothing for themselves potentially, and that can be just as damaging as being too selfish, I'd argue.
So, from a perspective of sex for blokes, it's no doubt that giving of yourself but taking into account the needs of others is probably a good idea.
It's all about balance, isn't it? Essentially, I mean,
it can be.
Sex
on top of that wardrobe, it's definitely balanced.
The row machine as well.
Blimey. There is a gym downstairs, isn't there? Crikey, I'm not going on that again.
Yes, clean up and out fine. But sex is very different, I presume, for women. I mean, anatomically, I remember a guy on Big Brother once, one of the early ones. He was this big Scottish weightlifting guy. I think his name was Jason. And he lied.
Blonde-haired fella.
Yes, and he's very vain. And he actually lied.
Tarzan, sorry.
Yeah. He lied on the interviews to get into on his application form that he'd slept with over 100, or I think it was 300 women. He gave this persona of, Mr. Player, basically, Mr. James Bond, and he admitted once he was in the house that he had lied, and he.
How much had he lied by?
I don't know his actual number.
Was it instead of 100 to 300, it was 1 to 3 or something?
Quite possibly. He was missing his working out and stuff like that, and he said to one of them, "I'd love to just be a woman for a day, to know what it's like to have a man inside me, to have sex from a female perspective." which you can perhaps question his bi-curious nature,
Yeah.
which
Not
is
necessarily.
fine. Well, no, absolutely. He's
You go for it, Jason.
absolutely.
Yeah.
100 men, why not?
Careful with the shining of those muscles, though.
Well, yes.
The oil, you can end up slipping out the window.
That's it. Health and safety first.
I mean,
And,
the other thing about sex is
just to finish that point on that perspective, it must be an entirely different feeling. I mean, you are in a vulnerable position as a woman when you have sex, aren't you? That's what it is, and that's why potentially they're so. And I'm speculating here. They are on the whole much more cautious about having sex because they are putting themselves in a position of. I wouldn't use the word inferiority, but submission.
physical vulnerability. You mean? That
Yeah.
type of thing.
Absolutely.
I must admit, I don't think I'm particularly dangerous at such times. But maybe I am, and maybe that is true. I don't know. I wouldn't like to say. Maybe our bobbers could could PM us anonymously and let us know.
You have a weapon, Richard, which could cause harm.
Well, yeah, but I normally keep it in the garage.
Well, okay, that's fine.
I mean, it's from a perspective of blokes. Though, it's traditionally been about notches on the bedpost, and I think that's a bit crass. And certainly, I'm glad that seems to be dwindling to some degree and seen for what it is. A man does not have a right, neither does a woman, and it's about consensual sex. I mean, anything else I think is pretty poor, really, and is to be frowned upon. But in terms of expressing yourself sexually in anything that you particularly want to do, providing it's consensual and doesn't really affect others, then go for it.
Absolutely, and it's done with good intention, I think.
Absolutely.
Because people do get hurt, don't they?
They do. Any unusual places?
Okay, graveyard.
Graveyard?
Yeah, not too far from here actually. Quite a few years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, that was on.
I didn't expect that one. I'm gonna say.
I had a bit of ketamine as well.
Oh God!
Which made it virtually impossible.
You are open, aren't you? You are open to these things. I think ketamine would frighten the life out of me. I've got to be honest, but anyway.
Yeah, in a graveyard.
In a graveyard especially.
Yeah, I wasn't very experienced either, so it did not do me any favours.
No.
But I don't think ketamine ever does, really, unless it's in small doses.
For horses.
I did it at Charles Darwin's house. That's my biggest claim.
Really?
Yeah. My manager.
How did that evolve?
Well, I was soon to leave the job, and I got close to one of the deputy managers there, and we'd started something, and I suggested I wanted to do it in his actual study, but there were cameras there. We managed to get a time when we were both on shift, and I was there, and one of the stock cupboards, which was I think one of the old nurseries, his children's nurseries. He had quite a few kids. We managed to sneak away. I helped her with a board. I was helping her with something.
Okay, this is. I'm not sure. I'm glad I asked. Charles Darwin will be spinning in his grave now.
No. It's about. He was about survival of the fittest, and reproduction, and all that.
It was the place
He had a lot
rather
of
than the
kids.
detail I was after.
He was a lot of kids. He had a lot of kids.
You seem to have noticed the detail a lot. It can't be that good.
Yeah, it was all right.
Anyway, right? Are you all right with that one? With that square?
I'm happy. Come on, I've got to ask you. Where's your place of unusual?
I think
things?
outdoors.
Outdoors. Yeah.
Generally fishing venues.
Right. Got your tackle out, did you?
Got your tackle out. Absolutely. Yeah, I was on the pole that day.
Yeah, maggot at the end of the line.
I don't know. What is unusual? I suppose it's where the wind takes you, isn't it? And if that wind is strong enough, then it probably will happen whether or not wherever you are.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, fair enough.
Nice one.
I'm good. I'm glad. I thought I'd bring an uncomfortable one again, It's good.
I think I've just about got away with it.
Look, back to tradition.
Back to tradition. Right, so shall I bring my first square?
Yes, please do.
Well, you'll be very surprised to know it's populism. On this day, the 23rd, it's polling day again.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
And European elections, which we of course never envisaged was ever going to happen once the advisory referendum result was in. And in those circumstances, I suppose it's a surprising day, but not necessarily a surprise as to what has actually been happening in the last few weeks. And that is this growing groundswell voice of essentially far-right fascistic parties looking to take over the European elections. And I find this extraordinary. If you are essentially anti-something, why on earth would you ever bloody stand for it? Why don't they just demonstrate? So, across Europe this week, it's highly likely that in 3 of the 4 biggest countries, that the far right will make the most gains in this cycle of MEP elections. So in this country, we're likely to have the Brexit Party, but also, of course, there are the English Democrats and also UKIP. And they're all likely to make gains. And I kind of thought, well, why is that? On essentially that what we seem to be seeing is a groundswell of opinion that only shares 3 main things. So, in sake of for sake of argument, you've got Nigel Farage with the Brexit, you've got Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, Tommy Robinson, you've got Marine Le Pen, you've got Matteo Salvini in Italy with the Lega, and you've got many others. You've got the Freedom Party in Austria and so on. And there's 3 things that they all agree on. And they agree on a complete disdain for what they would see as a federal Europe. But what they're actually looking to do, secondly, a hatred for foreigners. So essentially, the irony is that these people seem to be getting together and sharing ideas and looking to work together, but they don't actually like each other because they are very nationalistic and boundary driven and would actually look to stop each other from having essential free movement between each other, unless perhaps they agreed with each other. The third one is also the destruction of Islam and a completely overriding what I would see as Islamophobic attitude. Those are the 3 things that Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, Marine Le Pen, Matteo Salvini et al. They all agree on. However, they don't agree on most other things. So when you vote for somebody, you're not essentially looking to... I suppose the European elections is just a one-off. The main reason, however, that somebody on the far right, somebody on the alt-right would vote is because they feel so utterly strongly on those 3 issues. And the truth is, I think, that is probably going to be about 15% of the eligible electorate. And you can absolutely be sure that everybody who holds that sympathy will vote today.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I am aware.
I've already seen on my... it's about 15% of my friends list. And I think 15% is probably where it's at, this nationalist populist belief that essentially sovereignty is everything. But the truth is, fascism doesn't really like democracy either. On the grounds, what it likes is a collection of same thinking, same attitudes, same beliefs, and doesn't necessarily like diversity of view, and actually disdains anybody who is quite different to them.
Yes, I've had a look at... I saw my brother's
populism.
polling cards on the map today, And I thought, because obviously we spoke about this in our last show at Riri's Coffee House.
A little bit, we did touch on it, yeah.
About the vote.
We did, yeah.
And I made it obviously clear that I hadn't voted. And I'm still not sure today, without ruffling you too much, if I am.
You're not going to ruffle me anymore. I've said my piece. I think it's. I think you people should exercise their democratic right to vote, and for the reasons we mentioned.
Yeah. But I felt when I saw it, obviously having not voted in the local elections, that these are for people who are even further away from us. They're holding power, not even, it's not Baildon Council, Shipley Town Hall or Westminster. It's so far away that I can see a reason for voting to take that power back in some way without, for the sake of just purely having some amount or a greater amount of control about what happens within your local community. And I do see that point of view, and I wouldn't see it as racist. I think it can very quickly become racist or prejudiced. But I do see where people are coming from if they feel helpless in this in a system where really what they do, what happens to them, is not in their control and is in the hands of people that haven't got a clue about the north of England or the south of Italy. They are in one small part of it, a kind of like this bland canvas of political elitism that's very much about procedure or whatever, but really doesn't have a clue about the people's lives that it's
No, I think that there's no doubt that Europe has become distant from its electorate, from its peoples. And one of the problems with Europe, and one of the axes that are used to smash the this European idea, if you like, is that it's wasteful, that it's essentially bureaucratic and is looking to create a sovereign state of Europe. The interesting thing is that prior to the Brexit vote in 2016, all the things that the Brexit Party now says that it wants, i.e. control of movement, sovereignty, and the restoring of democracy to London rather, or to England rather than, or Britain rather than Europe, we're largely in our own hands anyway, and that's what I don't understand, and therefore I think it's probably about something else. You mentioned racism there. When I watched in the run-up to the EU referendum, Nigel Farage standing in front of, on posters on billboards throughout Bradford, this massive queue of all brown-skinned migrants, all seemingly heading for us. What a sham that was. And if that wasn't fascist propaganda, then I bloody don't know what was. Go back and have a look at Hitler's propaganda sheets. Look at how history has defined fascism. That is what that was. And that's what that is, and that's what it is today.
What about the argument that...
And fascism is essentially racist because it generalises and looks to place a hierarchy amongst peoples based on their culture and their colour of their skin.
I mean, you can... Obviously, Islam doesn't differentiate by the colour of skin, but you could argue that...
they've simplified that, haven't they?
There are sects of Islam that are very, you could say, fascist in their nature. I mean, look at ISIS. God, yeah. Look at a lot of Muslim activity, and they are very much... Absolutely. You are Muslim or you are non-Muslim. Yeah. And there is very little leeway. Well, look at Saudi Arabia, you get...
I've got to tell you, that's not my experience of the Muslim community. It's a bit like when we categorise Catholics, if you like. I mean, most bobbers will not know that I am actually a baptised and confirmed Catholic. And as soon as you talk about Catholicism, or if you look at Catholicism, people say, what a bunch of hypocrites. What a bunch of sort of child-abusing...
Yeah. Well, this is it.
What a lot, and it generalises and generalises, and yet most of the Catholics I know are extremely nice people. Most of the Muslims I know are extremely nice, well thought out, well groomed, prideful people who actually are very, very similar to you and I because they want the same thing.
They're human, absolutely.
They're human. Their skin bleeds red.
Yeah, and I went travelling.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
Neither do I. I went travelling at a very early age, and I've been lucky enough before that to go on family holidays or whatever and experience other cultures throughout my journey up until this point. And I realised very quickly that people are people. The world is a very complex place, and you'll find different people of different attitudes and persuasions, tolerances, the world over. And as soon as I've realised that, all this stuff about an English person's like this, a French person's like that, a Pakistani person like that, is just absolute nonsense. And,
of course it is.
And for me, absolutely not important. It's not important to any of us. I was speaking to a butcher up in Bradford the other day, and talking about the Brexit and movement and things like that. And he said, look, put it like this, to the business community, and we all work, we all need money to have our lives and to have our freedom. He said, people don't ask you what club you're in before they take your money when you make a sale to them. They don't ask you anything. You want that product, brilliant, I will have your money. And it does. The rest does not matter. Business people want to do business.
Absolutely. People just want to get on.
They want to get by. They want to have a nice life. They want to have their families. They want to have their time.
Which brings me to the point as to why is this hatred being essentially stoked up? And why are the people who essentially are making up this movement so angry? And I think they have legitimate anger that can be to some degree pointed towards Europe, but it's far more about the way in which the world is now run. If you look at the way in which these votes have voted in Donald Trump, for example, which has mobilised people's fears and insecurities. I mean, Trump started with Make America Great Again, which essentially took the premise that America was shot to pieces. We are constantly bombarded, or certainly the newspaper media, constantly bombard us with images of migrants being this or migrants being that, because it's an agenda.
Yeah, and
if you look at the figures, are migrants more likely to commit crimes of any kind than any others? No, they're not. They're about similar, and in most of the ethnicity categories, they're actually less than white British as a proportion of their populations, and that for me sort of gives the lie to it, really, doesn't it?
Well, yeah.
And it then becomes cruel, it then becomes nasty, and it becomes judgmental, and that is what gets my goat about fascism. Because fascism is a march, it's a movement, it's a oneness, it's about us against the world, it's about we're it, you're shit. If I'm called a bloody snowflake anymore, I'll come and bloody snow on you. I'll tell you that now. I'm not a snowflake. No. Having said that, those people who get so angry about snowflakes are actually exhibiting those same characteristics that essentially they always say that snowflakes are whiners. They always say that they get angry about things like gender and sex and all types of those sort of grey area topics that perhaps they feel just uncomfortable talking about.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, the alt-right, fascism and so on. I just wanted to...
I'll come back. I was going to say something on that. The experience, you talk about migrants being generally decent people. When I was down in Kent, so it's a hotbed for UKIP activity and the front line, if you like, if you're going to talk in those terms, between Europe and this country, this island. And I lived in a house with mostly immigration population. There was a big Polish population. Me and James Jangles were probably the only two British people there. There was a Portuguese guy, worked like hell. He did not give two shits about this country's politics. He said, I'm going to work, I'm a welder, I have my skill, I've worked in France, I'm working here, I'm doing that, I work 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, or whatever, 5 days a week. I pay my taxes, I'm saving up, and I'm going to go at some point.
Yeah.
He liked his music, he enjoyed his food, he did not care about anybody else. He was not doing anybody any harm. And he was probably a bit homesick. Like a lot of people, I got
displaced.
I got from a lot of people. They were here to work, and a lot of people don't want to be here. They're here because they come from a war-torn country or a country that's really in the shit economically. Who, as the people on the alt-right know and treasure so much their homelands, they should know, sure, on a human level, that being isolated and alone is a horrible thing, and it's not first choice. These people don't want to be away from their families. They don't want to be having to work God knows how many hours a day in order to put that money all back home and never see their children. This is not their option in life. This is what they're making the best of the situation they have. And yet they've got to run. And I look at other British people and they're complaining about crap working conditions and all this and all that. And these people are just getting on and doing the jobs that we don't want. And yes, that's an issue apparently.
No, it is. Yeah, absolutely, and it shouldn't be. I mean, I was particularly struck. Sometimes someone nails it, and sometimes it's not somebody that you particularly like or whatever, or previously respected. And there is a piece doing the rounds on social media, which was Question Time about 5 years ago with Russell Brand. And on the same panel was Nigel Farage. And it is this incitement to hatred that Russell Brand nailed when he said that Nigel Farage was essentially a pound shop Enoch Powell. And the rivers of blood speech of Enoch Powell's and that incitement to hate and to demark populations as being good, evil, and essentially never the twain shall mix because of cultural Aryan horribleness is something that I really, really, really find uncomfortable, because a lot of people are being incited to hate in this way, and the truth is those people are actually being misled, because if they just take the opportunity to talk to people, to say hello to people as we do, they will gain so much from these people as they will gain from us. And it is about getting on in this world. There are 7.5 billion people in this world, and that's possibly majorly the problem. We are a very successful race. And in those circumstances, I just want us to get along. And this type of hatred and incitement to hatred, I just wish they'd stop, because I can't help but think it's not for the reasons that they're saying it is. No. And that the reasons are actually all about self and selfishness and self-aggrandizement. And that is the sadness, and yeah, that's what will happen today.
Okay. Right, well.
Oh, an Arsenal mug.
An Arsenal mug, yes.
Let's take us to Baku.
Come on, the Gunners. I don't really mean that, to be honest, not anymore.
Actually, that's just one more thing of that, and that is the Arsenal are going to the Europa League final next week.
Yeah.
And one of their players, Henrik Mkhitaryan, can't play.
Right.
And that is an ethnic conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And Baku being in Azerbaijan and Henrik Mkhitaryan being an Armenian, they cannot guarantee his safety. And for me, if any of our bobbers are from FIFA or UEFA, pull that bloody final. It's not right that this guy can't go for geopolitical reasons or for the basis of his ethnicity. And it is totally and utterly wrong. And pull it.
There we
Play
go.
It on. Play it up at Eccles Hill on the back of the
footy pitches round here. It's
exactly.
fine, isn't it?
Play it somewhere else.
There we go. The Old Valley Parade.
The Old Valley Parade would be
Ellen
great.
Road. We can cross borders there.
What? God, blimey.
See, you're getting tribal already. I'm not going to say it. Right. My second square, eh?
Yeah. What's your second square?
My second square is origins.
Origins?
Yes. I don't know why I picked this one. I mean, I've started reading a history book recently, which is, like a brief history of the world, if you like, in some ways. And it starts with the origins of humanity, which I find fascinating. It is one of my favourite subjects, simply because...
So you've had Nucky and Charles Darwin's house,
yeah,
and now you're bringing origins of the species.
Yeah, well, they are potentially linked. But I find that...
Missing link.
Yes, loads of me. I find it wonderful thinking about how many generations, sex, how many different people, how many animals have had to have sex for me and you to be here today. Those moments of presence and those opportunities that people have had for millennia. In fact, it's happened over and 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 over again. And
they've been at it, haven't they?
They have. We do.
Mostly they have busy. Probably in their fishing spots.
Absolutely. That's why you know it so well. And I find it fascinating. And the origins of the species for me, and Charles Darwin was obviously a huge man for this. Beyond 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people still of the Catholic faith or Christian, were very much of a creationist view that, the human body was made by an ethereal being, God, something external of us. And just a little bit of ancient history or prehistoric history with compelling evidence by these very unassuming scientists who do not get on the soapbox like Mr. Farage or prophets potentially. Or Mr. Sleek. Find these compelling bits of evidence, these skeletons in the ground, like there's Lucy, which I may have mentioned on the show before. She's 4.5 million years old, or whatever. She's one of the very first.
Wow.
I've got the name. It's like an she's an Australopithecus. They've named her.
Australopithecus.
Yes. And she was one of the early or pre-Homo sapiens. In this book,
one of the first hominids.
Yeah. We came, according to the fossil findings, the original human came from Africa. And we around about 5 million years ago, 4.5 million years ago, is when the early pre-human templates were there. And you go on a few years into that, and eventually you've got, wonderful stats like they think that between 1.8 million to 500,000 years ago, that's when we started, at some point during that, we started to master fire. So we...
Okay.
And before
I love it when you bring statistics.
Yeah, he does. 2.5 million years, so a bit before that, we were... we had it here. We had a meat-rich diet. So, for about 1 million years, we were eating raw meat, essentially, and a high energy.
No, some would say there's a lot wrong with that, but I've got to say I do like my meat rarer than well done.
Well, you could argue that we've been eating it just as long rare as we have anything else. And then there were the Neanderthals, obviously, that went into Europe. But they're on that scale of close to 5 million years. They were only 300,000 years ago. So the last, 10%, less than 10% of human existence in that way, they've been around. And on 1 million years, you had one Homo erectus in Asia. They started to come out of Africa into Asia.
I see how these squares are connecting.
Well, there we go, yes, very good. But it was only 24,000 years ago that the Homo sapien that came out of Africa, only I think it was 600,000 years ago, Homo sapien, our species of ape, if you like, came out of Africa and started to dominate Asia. And before you know it, the Neanderthals are lost. And we're only 24,000 years ago, bear in mind again, we've come from 4.5 million and beyond that. 24,000 years ago, we started to become this sophisticated and world-dominating species.
You speak for yourself.
And only 6,000 years ago, we settled. So, we for that whole entire time, we were this nomadic people almost. And I think just 6,000, and that's when civilization started. That's actually when we started to get shit done, which is a beautiful thing for me in my life. I feel like the last couple of years, I've started to settle If I'm talking about the human history encapsulated in my life.
Well, it's quite interesting where you started with this, and that was essentially the evolution of species. I had a lovely conversation with my daughter Jessica, who's 9, as some of the bobbers will know, and she said, "Daddy, did you know that we are descended from apes?" And I was able to give her the fascinating fact that essentially, in terms of DNA, you and I are more closely related to the chicken than apes. Now that's surprising, haven't you?
It is.
It's just one of those quirky things on the grounds. I think it's 99.7% of the DNA is essentially equatable to that of the lineage of the current day hen, if you like. Whereas in terms of the lineage of primates, from which almost certainly the hominids first raised themselves up, unless they were a separate strain, but long way back, I mean, we're all related essentially to sludge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And ooze, and the first organisms. And I think that is fascinating. But interestingly enough, in terms of God and in terms of creationism, Stephen Hawking put it right.
Yeah.
And he was put on the spot when he first put forward the Big Bang Theory, if you like, or was propounding on the Big Bang Theory, because it wasn't just him. And he said, "What about the creationists?" And he said, "Well, all that I've done is essentially theorised and partly proven that essentially our universe was initially formed because of a collapsing star and the resulting supernovas, the explosion that's still rippling now." He said, "I didn't disprove the existence of God on the grounds that creative moment does that. I mean, it's a fascinating subject, isn't it? I mean, the fact that from that Big Bang, the sort of 96 original elements, if you like, that were present in that explosion are in you and in me.
Yes, absolutely.
And in chickens. And Jessica. And everything around us essentially contains those same building blocks. And DNA is very similar. And it's just that from a perspective of comparison as to what we've got and they've got, we are actually closer to chickens than primates.
I've never heard that before, and I really feel quite sceptical about it.
Yeah.
How could it possibly so? Because they come from dinosaur stock, do they? And they surely can't predate the dinosaur in terms of branching off on the tree of life.
No, they probably learned to fly because of dinosaurs. I don't know. Essentially, it's about DNA is in everything.
Yeah.
Every living organism, every living thing. And in terms of what that DNA constituent parts are made up of, the chromosomes and so on,
so
we have more in common purely as a percentile with a chicken than a gorilla.
Because that makes... I mean, does that mean but we're still closer related to a gorilla?
You can accept that. You can accept that something doesn't necessarily look right, but is true. You don't mind it to that. Surely...
I feel like I'm going to have to look it up.
Yeah, do.
I can't.
And if anyone wants to fact check anything that we do on Brothers of Battenburg, then please do.
I mean, a hand, like, just in terms
we'll
of
learn
a wing,
too.
Absolutely. A wing compared to a hand. I mean, you look at a gorilla, and it's one of my dreams to meet a gorilla, essentially, just be in the presence of one. You know, they have the digits that we have.
Okay.
And a hen has a wing. So how is that?
If you look at the bone structures, they're very interesting on the grounds that if you look at the rib cage and the way in which wings are made, they essentially, our bone structures are very similar.
But not as similar as a gorilla and a human, I'd argue.
True, quite possibly. Yeah. I mean, monkeys and other primates with tails, you would say, that's where your coccyx came from. But there are all sorts of other physiological differences, and I'm going to stick with this. We are more closely DNA related to chickens than primates. And if not, my daughter's going to be very disappointed because I think she's told everyone at school.
Yeah. I'm very sceptical, I must admit.
So Origins.
I've got a poem about Origins.
Have you?
Yeah, which I've written, which I thought I'd read.
Yeah,
since I've written it. Yeah, so Origins. Where do we come from? Who told our hearts to beat that fast or slow? Drum, 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 drum. Who do you know? And who knew us before? Old Father Time has been knocking on the door for millennia upon millennia upon millennia. And he's come up with us, or we've come up with ourselves. Origins are just lines on each other's backs, deep valleys, mistakes come good, millions of years left in the woods, amongst the trees, chewing on leaves, then the taste of meat, added skills to deceive. Crafty and crafted, our origins lie, from the drum in our hearts to the blink in our eye.
That's fab. Origins.
Origins, yeah.
A state of origin.
Do you know where you come from? Your incest, your family origins.
Well, my name's pretty easy, really. I mean, the Sarah family tree. I mean, I actually have photos of 7 different generations of Sarahs, and my dad has gone into this in massive detail. And I think he's got one generation where he's not clear, and also the original story of how the Sarahs sort of found themselves in Cornwall. It's not 100% clear, but essentially he's gone back about 16 generations, which places it around the Spanish Armada.
Wow.
And there was certainly a guy called Ferdinand de Serra who was shipwrecked in Cornwall.
Fantastic.
And only survived because all the way down the south coast of England, if the Spanish Armada sailors managed to get to shore, they were essentially hacked to bits.
Yes.
Whereas in Cornwall, the Cornish actually hated the English more than they hated the Spanish.
Terrific.
So Ferdinand, whether or not he is actually a direct line descendant, and I rather hope he is. My dad would probably say, no, I'm not sure he is at all. But certainly that story has been told on many occasions. And he married a local Cornish lass, and the theory is that he dropped the D. So he became Ferdinand or Frederick Sarah. And that started but our origins go back through the Cornish tin mining industry, and we were big iron founders. The Sarah family had 6 different iron foundries and made much of the mining equipment to get tin and make the tin mining in Cornwall one of the great world centres of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, fantastic.
So us Sarahs, we've been about.
Absolutely. I mean, same with the Hopkers. I know more about the Hopker side because it's a more unusual surname like yourself. Yeah. And my uncle's done a lot of research on where we come from, and probably got us back to about the same time, maybe a little, probably 100 years on from that. But yeah, he's got us to the old German-Polish border in that part of the world, where we had a mayor at one point who was of a town there, and we made our way. We don't know if he'd come from Poland, maybe Israel, because Hopker may be a derivative of Jacobson, if we take it back. So we could be Jewish heritage. I don't know when we dropped that.
I don't know about you, but we've had 3 generations where they were definitely chickens.
Okay, fantastic. He's been having me on from the start.
I haven't done this. Fact check.
We have
more DNA in this from birds than we have.
I'm going to fact it. I'm going to check it.
We have.
By the way, Bobbers, do say hello. And
hello, Bobbers.
And give us a message. Give us potentially some squares to talk about.
That'd be fun.
We made our way through Germany, Amsterdam, and from Holland when Sri Lanka was Ceylon. One of the family members decided to get on a boat and was part of the colonial era in Ceylon.
Wow.
Married a Sri Lankan lady. So I think it's my great grandmother was Sri Lankan. So we've got some, of that kind of blood in us. Was there for a couple of generations. I think it was their son got on a boat to London, joined the British Navy. It changed hands around that time. At 14, joined the British Navy, ended up in London, and we've got a picture of his seaman's card, but a seafarer's card, and it says man of colour because he is at least half caste. So the Hopkins arrived in this country as people of colour.
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's one extraordinary melting pot, and then going back to the populist movement and going back to that racist nature, that Orion heritage, if you like, of seeing the white supreme and so on. I think that's the saddest part of it. Yeah. I mean, the cultural and seizure of the most obvious one is, I'm pretty certain he existed, but Jesus of Nazareth, for example, he was not. I'm really sorry, Christians. He was not a white man.
No, he wasn't, was he?
He was an Arab.
Oh yeah, he was, wasn't he? And closer to an Arab.
And therefore, this betrayal and this cultural approbation of colour of skin and so on, it's just silly. Stop it. Yeah, faith is something different, and I would respect anybody's faith. But to be silly about it, and the thing about faith in many ways is it's about, there are two separate sides to it. There is your faith in whatever, a spiritual existence, an overlord, whatever it is, a supreme being, a creator, and there is then this silly thing called religion, which is man-made.
Yes.
And it is the religious boundaries that are essentially about the power of men, about supplication, and about the way in which we can control and grow. That's man-made.
Absolutely.
Faith isn't. And to see people of faith is often a wonderful thing, and to see people living out their faith, is often a wonderful thing and a very positive thing too.
A lot of religions do need fact-checking, don't they, really, to say the least? I mean, I mentioned the other day that unicorn, I was very surprised to hear, it makes 9 appearances in the Bible. Still no fossils to be found. And yet, I think one of the points, I'll finish on this with Origins, one of the points I wanted to make about Origins, and I talked about it slightly at the start of the square, was this thing about scientists very quietly doing these evidence-based work, and yet still this.
Excuse me.
The vast majority of people of a faith-based nature who believe in these religious doctrines, more people in the world than not believe in things that don't have any facts behind them. And I will not stand behind Western values or Western cultures or Western beliefs on a lot of things. I think technology's got out of control, social isolation. There are a lot of things we can learn from Christianity, Islam. But in terms of scientific fact and Western science, and the understanding we now have of our historic past that basically blows the water out of a lot of these religious doctrines, is, for me, undeniable, and yet it's completely underpreached. And that's the problem, because you have the emotional populists, as you talk about, like Nigel Farage and other prophets and other religious people who have a hidden agenda about it. It's not because they want the truth, they want the power, they want the money, they want their own way.
Absolutely.
And the scientists don't. They just want to find out what the truth is about something.
Absolutely.
And they don't. You never hear a scientist coming out, we've made this fantastic discovery about Lucy, this ancient bones, and I'm going to use this in my next campaign for the President of the United States. It doesn't happen, does it? And
today you brought Farage back up, and I'd like to do the same. Now, I find it extraordinary that a breakaway leader like this, a right-wing anti-immigration person, is married to a German, picks up £250,000 a year in European salary. No wonder he's standing again. And his children have dual European and British citizenship. And that is something that he is seeking to deny my children. And that makes me angry.
Yeah.
Because of the hypocrisy of it.
It's ridiculous.
And don't worry, he'll pick up, if he doesn't get in, he'll pick up his pension, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, there we go. Origins.
So I've got one last one, and it's not a big one really. It's one that I wanted to talk about because it's something that I do feel, and it's an emotive one. It's another emotional one, which perhaps fits in with perhaps some of the actions that we've taken recently or in the past. I once brought in embarrassing moments to this. I mean, this isn't what this is about. It is, and again we talk about religion. My square this week is guilt. And how it affects people. And how we're made to feel when we get things wrong. And I guess I brought it because in one or two circumstances recently, and they're not particularly personal ones, they're more professional ones, I've been made to feel guilty for being me. And I really struggle with that, because if I'm being me, then I have a right to be me, and I have a right to get it wrong. And I think society in general, and especially 2019's version of what is right and what is wrong, is generally so uninformed and uncharacteristically inhumane. It's not a human reaction to blame somebody for being who they are. It's almost like a sheep reaction. And it makes people feel guilty for being who they are. And that suppresses them and stops them from growing and being themselves and expressing themselves as a full portion. Perhaps that's the aim.
Yes.
Create guilt in others so that essentially that gives you an advantage. You see where I'm coming from?
Are you... I'll be
not
straight.
you, no, not you. It's not about us or you or in any shape or form or any of our interactions. It's about how people are marginalised. And they're marginalised through making them feeling guilty for either imposing. I see this in a lot of the migrant populations at the moment. They actually almost feel guilty for being there, because they've been so smashed. The Windrush generation, they came because they wanted to help us. They came because they saw this Mother England. They've been colonised for many, many, many years.
Yes.
And yet, when they came, they were made to feel guilty for who they were.
Absolutely. I think you're right. It is a way of controlling people if you can make them feel guilty about something. Guilt comes from, as you say, feeling like you've done something wrong. Sometimes, I mean, what is wrong and right? Some people feel in their eyes that people have done something wrong. I mean, guilt, you can ask the question, what's it useful for?
Guilt.
And I don't know. I mean, I know people in my life that seem to feel very guilty about things, and it can last for years.
Yeah. It can.
And I guess I'm quite good, if I talk from my perspective, about forgiving myself on things quite quickly.
Forgiveness is the answer.
And it has to come first and foremost from yourself. I don't think you can't ask for forgiveness from anybody else, because that's their choice, not yours.
Very true.
And that's their business.
Yeah.
It's their business whether or not they forgive you. You can only forgive yourself and move on, and take lessons. If you feel like you have done something wrong, then learn from it and just don't do it again, or try not to do it again. And that's all. For me, that's the only thing you can do from an.
It's that classic thing, isn't it, that they say about you, side by the porch again.
What do they say about me?
And that is, you go places twice. The second time to apologise. There was a wonderful story actually in the Independent today, or the Eye as it's now known, and it was just a little sort of one of those little snippets in the corner that sort of took up 10 lines, if you like. And Lowestoft Library, they received £100 from an embarrassed reader for non-returning of a library book.
Right.
The library book was returned, and in the book was The Metaphysical Poets, and it'd been outstanding for 52 years.
Oh, crikey.
And it was basically sent back through guilt. Somebody was looking to dispense of themselves that guilty feeling for not having done something, and they'd gone back and made it right.
Yeah. I think
perhaps that's where you can get redemption from guilt.
Absolutely.
Through self-awareness and then going back and making it right.
Second chances and giving yourself a second chance. The one thing that I'd hate anybody to do, and the frustration thing and almost the unforgivable thing you can do with guilt is to allow it to stop you from doing the right thing. Because it's almost like some people feel, oh, I'm so guilty about what I've done. I've done a terrible thing. Yeah, you probably have done a terrible thing. Okay, that's done. But it's like, oh, but I can't do anything about it. And I couldn't possibly. I've done it, and it's never going to be changed. And it's like, no. Yes, you may have done something wrong in your eyes or someone else's, but don't let that stop you from doing the right thing now, or forgiving yourself, and starting afresh with something. Don't stop it from making you do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Because there's always the opportunity.
Human condition. I mean, crikey. If there's any of our bobbers out there who think they're perfect, I'm very, very interested. We'd be interested in meeting you, because we sure as hell ain't.
No, absolutely not.
And in those circumstances, guilt. I've mentioned on the embarrassing moments thing that I had guilty things, but there's also guilty secrets, aren't there?
Yeah.
Guilt being something that can drag you down and make you feel worse about yourself. So get it off your chest, bobbers. And if you've done something wrong, see if you can make some kind of reparation about it.
Yeah.
Because I think that shows your self-awareness. It shows your evolution. It shows you've come from an origin and gone to somewhere else. And I think the problem with people making people feel guilty is that they draw a line under the sand with that person, and they essentially jettison them.
Yes.
And I think that's such a waste. People have the right to make mistakes.
Absolutely.
The right to learn from those mistakes. And the right to move on.
Yes.
And
we're all changing with different people constantly, and we go from one moment to the next.
That's the interesting
about punishment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like our prison and things like that, and how prisons are supposed to be, the right thing for people. It's like, someone did something wrong. How long are you going to punish them that for? What?
I think with prison, it's essentially, are they in danger of reoffending? And I think the problem with the prison system is that probably people come out of the prison system probably more likely to offend than they probably did at the point in which they were sent to prison. And are they, because we've kind of given up on rehabilitation, because it hasn't completely eradicated crime, if you like.
I don't think we ever started. When did this rehabilitation start?
I think we're back to snowflakes again, aren't we? And trying to help people find another track in life. I mean, there was all sorts of stories in the 90s and early noughties about people being rewarded for crime. There was a big campaign where kids who'd been essentially ASBO'd out of the thing were then being taken on holidays. Why are we using our taxpayers' money on this? And the truth is, they were essentially trying in no small way to rehabilitate these kids.
Yeah.
Some of the best things I've ever seen in terms of rehabilitation. I mean, I saw a project in Grimsby a long while back that was about twackers, taken without consent, kids who nick cars all over the place. And the reoffending rates absolutely went through the floor when they were involved in their own mechanics courses. That cost money, but in terms of what it saved society and saved within that person and gave them a second chance because they'd made mistakes, I mean, it took away much of their guilt as well. And
exactly, and there's usually no one guilty party in any situation. There's always some takes two to tango, and in society, where does the responsibility lie with the state to get things right for people, especially young people? Can you say that they're
providing
guilty?
that structure, providing that infrastructure, providing that attitude, and providing that leadership, I guess. And I think that is something that is so sad about what's happened since June 2016. The country has stopped. It's talked about Brexit non-stop. And there are all sorts of terrible... When 1 in 5 children in our country... That's what I feel guilty about. 1 in 5 children in our country are actually living in what the UN terms abject poverty. And that's been hidden because of all this agenda, and that's what I suspect is going on today. When big business, when the banking sector, when finance people are essentially funding far-right groups, it's about creating that hierarchy, and you can become one of us. And when that makes other people feel guilty for who they are and frightened of being who they are, I think that type of behaviour and everything is really reprehensible. Absolutely. So I want to get rid of my guilt. I try on a daily basis by trying to improve and trying to make myself better. And if I do something wrong, it's not a weakness to apologise. It just ain't. It's a strength. Because it shows that you've actually understood. It shows your intelligence and it shows your ability to evolve. So don't keep that guilt inside you. If you look at it, analyse it, and as you rightly say, if it's not yours to hold, jettison it if you can. Yeah. Forgive yourself, be kind to yourself, but also be kind to others.
Turn it into something positive. Use all that energy, because people put so much amount of thought, time and energy into feeling guilty. Imagine if instead of being exhausted by guilt, you could use that guilt and turn it into something positive in your life.
Yeah.
Huge amounts could be done.
So, we've got rid of our guilt.
Yes.
We've learnt about each other's sex lives.
A little bit, yeah.
And we've looked at origins and populism.
We have.
I think that's probably enough for our bobbers to go along with.
I think so.
To go on with. And Side by the Poacher Guy, I think probably that's us for another week.
Yes.
Enjoyed that.
Thank you. Good.
Nice.
See you next time.